The low, soft drone of the quadcopter was drowned out by the squeals of delight from the children invited to Diddy's 12th birthday. The parents of Diddy's 5 visiting friends had dropped them off earlier, and now all 6 girls were playing in our backyard, waiting for the announcement that the cake and ice cream were ready. I sighed thinking about it, our backyard. Yes, this was our backyard until the divorce was final about 2 months ago. Now it was just my backyard, except that it also belonged to my son Dylan, 14, who sat on the patio with a feigned indifference, and my daughter Dean, 11. Well, 12 as of today, hence the birthday. Wow, my little princess is just 1 year out of her teens. God help me. We've survived Dylan's transition. Well, for now. Now I need to find a way to help Diddy navigate this minefield on the path to womanhood without guidance or help. Crap, it's Diddy's special day, the last birthday of her childhood before entering the dramatic, luxurious, and painful time of adolescence. I had already decided a few days before that I would not allow the joy of this day to be overshadowed by thoughts of Diddy's mother, to my ex-wife Donna. Instead, I will focus on giving Diddy a memorable time and also get ready for the fun I'm putting together with my friend and now partner in our exciting and promising to be lucrative business, Nirmal Pradhan. Careful, Diz, I said to Nirmal as I controlled our remote-controlled aerial platforms using the tablet controllers each of us had. Don't reset too early. They might run away and we'll miss the full effect. Just make sure you fly the other drone low over the back fence and turn on the lights at the right time, my Indian-American friend replied. When everyone is distracted from the real threat, then. The bombs are ready. He had almost completely lost his sing-song subcontinental speech rhythm during his 6 years here in the U.S. In fact, his life in Tennessee for 4 of those 6 years softened his English pronunciation and led to the introduction of expressions like y'all into his everyday vocabulary. He sometimes even joked to me that in Knoxville he learned that y'all was singular and all y'all was plural. 6 girls at a birthday party were now moving around the backyard, looking at the quadcopter hovering above them. It made a low hum, moved slightly in one direction for a short distance, then hovered again. The girls watched him and walked under him. He moved again in the other direction for about 20 meters, and the girls flocked in that direction. Below the quadcopter that was moving about 8 meters above them, the one we called Enola Gay was suspended a round object with ribbons flowing around it. We let the girls know that it was an air piñata and that it would drop little candies on them at the right time. While we kept the other quadcopter, the one Diz, and I called Ed out of sight. I was the one who actually controlled it, and I disabled it for a while. He waited quietly in a small clearing in the woods, just outside our back fence. I put my tablet controller down so I could reach the Budweiser Black Crown bottle. I've been choosing this beer more often lately as I felt the need for a little more alcohol content after the unfortunate events of my divorce. But I wasn't going to get drunk today since I still had to drive. I just enjoyed the taste. So I limited myself to only 2 bottles. I coughed, choking due to the momentary distraction of her appearance. I knew that Diddy had invited Donna, my ex-wife, to her party, but it still upset me to see her as she walked out onto the patio as if she owned the place, still an arrogant queen, dominating anyone and everyone who came within her sphere of evil influence. She surprised me because I didn't notice her car arriving. I had to cough a couple of times to clear my airway of the stray beer that got in there when she distracted me for a split second. Donna still looked good, but not as impressive as she had been a few months ago. Her shoulder-length blonde hair, green eyes, and gorgeous body could always make the movement at least slow down if not stop completely. She was still very attractive lately, but had gained a little weight, which I'm sure she didn't like. The status of the most attractive woman in sight, which she had maintained for most of her life, since the age of 15, was now in danger of disappearing. Placing the wrapped gift on the table reserved for Diddy's gifts, she looked straight at me. At first, without expressing any emotion, her face quickly changed from brief delight to the absence of any emotion, then to a brief moment of sadness, followed by a clear desire to face the moment with determination. She sighed noticeably, trying to put on a polite smile of greeting. Glenn, she said, walking towards me. Donna, I limited myself to answer, turning to our daughter and her friends. I made a more or less successful attempt to dispel the tension that had arisen in my body due to her mere presence. She could still excite me, but now it was a different excitement. I looked at my watch and noticed that time could slip away if I wasn't careful. I put down the bottle of beer and picked up the tablet controller. "It's time, Diz," I said to my friend, standing a few feet away from me with his own controller in his hands. Concentrating on the controls of the Enola Gay, I couldn't tell if he knew Donna was here. I knew that, other than a slight distaste for her presence, he wouldn't care. "Okay," he replied, nodding simply as he maneuvered the Enola Gay closer to the back of the yard and the fence. I took my tablet controller and touched a point that activated it remotely. I couldn't hear it come to life behind the fence, but I noticed the system status indicator on my tablet, which informed me that all systems were okay, as they say in NASA. While Deese was distracting the girls by maneuvering the Enola Gay, I picked up the alien and raised it high enough to clear the trees on the way to our yard. In the bottom left corner of the tablet screen, there was a built-in window that allowed me to see what the alien was seeing through a miniature camera transmitting the image wirelessly to my controller. Using a different set of on-screen controls, I was able to remotely move the camera so that its field of view could rotate 360 degrees around the gyromont and even zoom in and out. But today there was no particular need for this. There is also no need for built-in remote recording functionality on the tablet controller. The girls were so focused on Enola Gay that they didn't notice how it descended as it cleared the last trees on the way to our fence. I heard Donna next to me take a deep breath of surprise at seeing it. She was about to shout a warning, but I growled at her. Not a sound. I didn't look at her, but I knew she was a little angry. Before the start of our divorce proceedings, I never allowed myself to be rude towards her, and she was not used to being at a reception. I don't know if it was the determination in my voice or her sudden indignation that made her exhale instead of shouting a warning to the girls and ruining the surprise. All I know is that she, for her own reasons, chose to remain silent while I remotely aimed the AT over the fence and brought it closer to where the girls were standing, but behind their line of sight. I quickly pressed the 2 dots on the control screen to engage the necessary AT functions to perform the surprise. 2 very bright flashing red and green strobe lights began to flicker alternately as it hovered at a safe altitude just above the head of the tallest girl in the group. A split second later, the sound effect went off. "Ah!" a loud signal sounded, imitating the siren of a police car. The girls screamed and turned in unison to see the frightening sight of 2 flashing strobe lights just above and behind where they stood. In that moment of paralysis, I heard Dees say, "Bombs ready," and looked up from his tablet to see Enola Gay release a round object with ribbons hanging underneath it. The object fell only a meter when suddenly there was an explosion from within with a slight pop, and the object disintegrated above the girls' heads. The ribbons descended smoothly around them just a few seconds after being lightly sprayed with water from a cone-shaped bottle of compressed CO2 that exploded inside the ball. As the Enola Gay began to make its way back towards the patio and D's, I saw a string with the remains of a fuse hanging underneath it. No fuse components flew apart or injured the girls. "Papa," Diddy shouted, partly indignantly, partly with humor, turning to Diz and me, laughing at them. I knew that she was mostly reacting to the fright of the sudden event that Diz and I had orchestrated. The spray of water was not strong enough to ruin their clothes or, God forbid, their hairstyles. Diddy started stomping over to where I was standing with Donna to express her displeasure, when I heard Donna next to me make a sound that sounded like she was choking. Turning to look at her for a moment, I saw that her eyes were wide open and her mouth was slightly open. She was clearly surprised, but there was something else. This something became obvious when she turned to me with rage and contempt. "It was you, bastard," she said in a quiet whisper. She then came towards me and spanked me hard. It's a good thing I didn't touch the tablet controller screen when I backed away from her punch. Otherwise, I might have smashed the ET or caused it to collide with one of the girls. As it was, it just hung in place. She calmed down a little and said, "You know, you can be a real cool son of a bitch sometimes." Not having the gift of a witty comeback or the ability to come up with quick one-liners, I surprised myself by answering rather quickly, "You mean, as opposed to being a real cool bitch all the time?" Donna's face turned red, and she stood very still, contemplating repeating the blow a minute ago. But when Did came up to me and put her arm around my waist at that moment, Donna calmed down a little and crouched slightly in front of Diddy so that she was at face level with our daughter. "Happy birthday, my dear." She reached out her hand to touch Diddy's shoulder, and my daughter released me enough to walk up to her mother and put her arm around her waist. Donna, although she didn't seem particularly comfortable with this public display of affection, she had never been one for public displays of affection, especially with me, nevertheless hugged Diddy and said, "I'm afraid I can't stay. I just came to bring you a gift and say that I love you, and of course, to wish you a happy birthday." Donna sounded pleasant enough, but looked at me with hatred. I did not care, and I no longer cared whether she understood the source of her recent misfortunes or not. I simply picked up the bottle of beer and took a sip before placing it on the table. I then tapped the tablet controller screen and landed the ET before touching the screen again to shut down the ET rotary motor. Donna turned and started to walk away when Did let her go and came back to stand next to me. I think she has already reached the age when it is not cool to hug her dad around the waist in front of her friends who are standing nearby and watching everything that is happening. Just as Donna reached the patio, Sandy Malloy came out the back door of the house and called out, "Who wants cake and ice cream?" The girls all ran to the picnic table, where paper plates and plastic utensils were laid out, while Sandy set out the cake. Seeing each other at the same time, Donna and Sandy simply locked eyes for a moment. Donna then looked at me again, nodded and shook her head, gave me the middle finger clearly, not caring that her daughter and friends might see it, and walked towards the car, presumably parked out front. No, Sandy and I weren't a couple or anything. This is not one of those stories where the duped guy ends up surrounded by women. Sandy was a single mother to Virginia, my daughter Diddy's best friend. Sandy became pregnant, but never married. Seeing that I was busy preparing for the party, she volunteered to help. Sandy has been to our house many times over the past 3 years, either to drop off or pick up Ginny, or to be part of the parental supervision at one of Diddy's girls' parties where Ginny was invited. So, naturally, Sandy knew more details than I would have preferred about the crisis in my marriage and its subsequent breakdown over the past year through her close communication with my daughter. After Donna left, the girls, along with Sandy, Diz, and I, enjoyed cake and ice cream. This was followed by the opening of gifts and the distribution of handfuls of small candies, which the girls felt cheated of a little earlier, after the event with the fake piñata and its wet surprise. Afterwards, Diz and I briefly explained and showed the girls Et and Enola Gay while maneuvering 2 drones around the backyard, of course. The more acceptable term these days is unmanned aerial vehicle or UAV, as the term drone has come out of fashion among civil liberties advocates protesting the government's use of military and police versions of drones at home and against nominal American citizens fighting terrorists abroad. Although the Federal Aviation Administration was still delaying the approval and licensing of commercial UAVs until 2015 or even later, Dees and I still did all the necessary basic research and testing that we could afford. We regularly maneuver 2 UAVs at minimal altitudes and on private land nearby to ensure we are on the cutting edge of commercial business when FAR restrictions are lifted. We probably broke a lot of rules in everything we did, but we laughed, telling ourselves that we could carry on as long as we remained literally under the radar. We also had overseas contracts and cash advances for the production of copies and even more advanced versions of Et and Enola Gay from Deez's 2 cousins in India. The 2 brothers were already planning to introduce UAV delivery there, not restricted by Indian laws, which has so far only been publicly announced here in the U.S. by the executives of Amazon.com and Domino's Pizza. These Indian entrepreneurs also saw themselves as commercial leaders throughout Southeast Asia in the use of UAVs for purposes such as remote sensing. Commercial aerial film production was also a lucrative endeavor. Add to these efforts challenges associated with oil and gas exploration and mountain rescue. We talked about the potential for big money. I was quite surprised by the size of the down payment and the promise of even greater rewards in the future. After all, Dees and I have been doing this since he completed his master's thesis last year while interning in the UAV research program. The FA finally approved extensive UAV research at only 3 universities: Texas A&M University, Virginia Tech, and the University of Alaska Fairbanks. Dees was part of the program at UF when he started renting a room from us. Dees worked diligently to complete his graduation requirements by interning at UF test sites near Pendleton and Tillamook. He came to us at a time when Donna and I urgently needed additional income for a short period of time, and we decided to rent out part of the house. Dees was the first to respond to the advert, and although Donna had some initial reservations about renting to a foreigner on a study visa, she eventually agreed. Dees moved in the week after we first met. Since my home was in Woodland, Washington, just outside and north of Vancouver along the Columbia River, this placed us about 3 hours from Pendleton and 2 hours from Tillamook. Dees only had to travel to these testing sites during testing. He used the rest of the time to complete his postgraduate work through distance learning from my home. But after the divorce, I let him live there for free. Although Dees's name was normal, everyone called him Dees, and he didn't seem to mind. Someone learned that the word Desi is a Sanskrit term for the people, cultures, and products of the Indian subcontinent or South Asia. From there, it was not far from the nickname Dizzy or Diz. He thought about it briefly the first time someone called him Diz literally for about 5 seconds before smiling and accepting it, realizing that his acceptance of the nickname coincided with his acceptance as part of our collection of friends and acquaintances. Before the divorce, I had a quiet conversation with Dees after he told me about the potential financial tsunami that was coming to the commercial UAV industry. I was already having trouble with my then-wife, Donna, especially when it came to finances. She and I had fundamentally different views on spending, saving, investing, and planning for our financial future. So I quietly reached out to my lawyer to help me hide my investment in UAV research and development, which Dees was now doing for his cousins after being released from a non-disclosure agreement related to his college internship. I was pleased that the terms of my divorce with. It took Donna to finalize the terms of my business with Dees and his cousins. This meant that any profit I might have made from my new business was excluded from the divorce agreement and was out of Donna's reach. After Diddy's birthday party was over, we took one of Diddy's friends home. Now we were driving back home with Diddy sitting in the back seat. Dylan was in front with me, nodding his head and occasionally whispering lyrics while listening to music through his smartphone and headphones. "Dad," Dylan asked, touching the phone screen to pause the music, "what does it mean when Elvis Presley says, 'no such zone'?" It took me a few seconds to switch my mind from thinking about Diddy's birthday, Donna's short visit and her outburst, and the consequences of taking Diddy's friend home. And then I realized exactly what Dylan meant. "Oh, you mean from that old song, Return to Sender?" I asked. He nodded, and I continued. "Your grandpa Taylor, my father, should have told me this when I asked him years ago. He said that when he was a teenager, when Elvis was still alive and young, and at the zenith of his musical career, the U.S. Postal Service had not yet introduced postal codes. Since most cities in America had only one post office, this was not necessary. But large cities such as Chicago, New York, and Los Angeles had more than one post office and city, were divided into delivery zones corresponding to the location of these postal buildings. I looked at him and saw him nod, looking out the windshield, understanding. Then he asked me, "What does it mean when Elvis says he sent a letter to Special D?" I responded, "These days, when you send a letter or package with special handling instructions, the U.S. Postal Service classifies it as certified mail, return receipt requested, priority mail, or express mail, or something similar. Back in those days, before these classifications came into existence, any special handling instructions or urgent delivery requests fell under the category of special delivery, or as some people called it, and as you hear in that old Elvis song Special D. Dylan nodded again and continued listening to his music. I looked in the rearview mirror and saw Diddy falling asleep after all the excitement of anticipation from the previous night and the tedious activities of preparing and hosting her birthday. I could understand. I had to go through all this with her too, as well as all the crap I had to go through with Donna showing up today. I pushed aside Donna's irritation and looked lovingly at Diddy, thinking, my little girl, yes, my little girl is growing up, just like her brother. My thoughts then went back to Dylan's question about an Elvis song he heard on the oldies channel of a music streaming app on his smartphone. I suddenly laughed loudly, which made Diddy open her eyes and look at me curiously in the rearview mirror. Turning my attention back to the road ahead, I continued to chuckle as I thought about that line from the song again. Yes, I thought, remembering the most important message I ever sent to my ex-wife. I sent it by special delivery. The wedding happened suddenly and without much enthusiasm. It was just 2 weeks after Donna and I graduated from high school, and a couple of months after we turned 18, she in April, me in May. Donna was pregnant, and everyone thought I was the culprit. Although I tried to convince my father and her father that she had dated at least 4 other guys while we were dating, my father asked me if I had had sex with Donna. As I lowered my head, avoiding his disapproving gaze, and nodded, he invoked an old undocumented and unofficial, but still observed in some mountain communities, legal maxim of village justice. If the source of the fraudulent check cannot be found, then the responsibility lies with the final endorser. A week later, I had to kiss the bride. It wasn't too difficult, since I had been lusting after Donna for over a year and really loved her, despite her obvious preference for playing the field throughout our senior year. And besides, Donna Swinford was truly a beauty. In fact, she had been the most beautiful girl in our senior class ever since she became a sophomore and her feminine curves began to blossom. And she knew it. Donna used the power of her looks in many ways during her time at school. She was considered the queen bee at school. She won over boys and destroyed other girls with her looks, comments, and attitude, and, according to rumors, even seduced some male teachers in order to get passing grades. But this last fact was never confirmed, and as far as I know, she never confirmed this to anyone. The rest of the stuff was common knowledge. After we were officially married, Donna's father offered to let us use the small apartment above his garage as a place to stay while we tried to cope with parenthood, work, and the difficult pursuit of higher education. After our boy was born, Donna, although her mother was not particularly happy with our living situation, was still more than happy to be able to care for Dylan during the day, while Donna worked a day job and I attended college and worked evenings several times a week. We may not have had the best start as a married couple, but Donna and I grew as a family and began to enjoy our lives together, and we even began to experience feelings of true love, as far as I could tell. We struggled financially at first, but with some pretty good jobs coming our way, and the pay raise I received after graduating from college with a business degree and being hired by a local company, we started to breathe a little easier. Our sex life together was amazing the first year. I've never had such a constant source of sex as I do now, being married. And Donna, who enjoyed sex before we got married, was delighted with our sex life. At least that's what it seemed to me. Less than 2 years later, our sexual activity began to noticeably decline. We still had sex often, but I started to notice a decrease in frequency, and this coincided with an increase in the time Donna spent outside the home going with friends from work, helping a friend with Mary Kay beauty parties, and participating in a mother's walking group. Only with the last of these 3 activities was Donna able to pick up Dylan, as she was able to push him in the stroller we found at a thrift store, along with the other young mothers and their children in the group. The other 2 activities involved me being at home with my baby and then my toddler son, or asking Donna's mother for help when I was working or studying. In any case, our sexual activity had dropped to perhaps its lowest level since our wedding when Donna approached me one night with a worried look on her face. Dylan, by then 2 years old, was playing with a stuffed dog at my feet while I studied when Donna finally spoke. "Darling, forgive me," she said softly, with a sad expression on her face. It took me a while to step away from a financial management problem I was working on for one of my classes to answer her. "Honey, what are you apologizing for?" I finally asked. "Glenn, I'm pregnant again, and—" I looked up in surprise and real joy at the news. Donna's expression showed that the situation did not bring her much joy. "Darling, this is great news," I said, getting up and going over to hug her. She didn't get up right away, instead forcing me to take her by the shoulders and lift her up for a hug and a kiss. Her enthusiasm might have been low when we started kissing, but she eventually kissed me back. I tried to let her know that I was glad to be a father again. In the end, Dylan turned out to be a delightful child and had not yet gone through the terrible 2 years that we often heard about from friends. About 9 months after that evening, Dean was added to our family. Let me tell you, this little girl won my heart from the moment the doctor cut the umbilical cord, cleaned her, wrapped her, and gave her to me to weigh. I was now officially a member of the Soft Daddies Club, being the father of a daughter, and I didn't even know it at the time. The next day I commented to Donna, while Dean was learning to breastfeed, that the baby must have gone to her family as her earlobes were not the same as those in the Taylor family. Donna inhaled sharply and immediately began to cry as soon as I said this. "Darling," I asked in surprise, "what happened?" Donna pulled herself together and looked at me strangely. Then she smiled sadly through her tears and said, "Glenn, honey, I'm just so tired from giving birth, and my mind and body are so agitated from the meds and all my hormones trying to get back to normal, I guess. Forgive me for all these emotions." She continued to look at me strangely for a while. Then I couldn't understand what was the matter. But then something seemed a little off with what she was saying, but I decided to believe her story out of love for her and our children and my own excitement. "Donna, I know it's been hard. Rest now and prepare to return home tomorrow. Mama Swinford has prepared everything in the nursery and is looking forward to us all coming home, especially little Dean." I smiled at her with as much love as I could express at that moment. Donna looked at me and responded with a smile and a raised eyebrow, one of her nonverbal cues to invite a kiss. I complied, and we both giggled at Dean's slight burp between us. Donna tied the pipes after Dean was born, declaring that 2 children was enough for her. We discussed this, and although I was not in favor of closing all avenues to expanding our family, I ultimately agreed with her. 11 years passed, almost to the day when I learned that we had been living a lie for a long time. After I got my degree and a good job, as I mentioned earlier, we began to feel the financial pressure we had been experiencing up to that point. We still had debt, but it became manageable. Banks like to categorize debt as good debt and bad debt. We soon achieved that balance between good debt and bad debt, which, coupled with recent changes in banking laws, allowed us to qualify for a low-interest mortgage. We also found a small but comfortable house at an affordable price, thanks to the bank's desire to receive income from the property seized during the divorce. Everyone was happy. The bank, since they were now making money from the property, Donna and I, because we now had our own place, and Mom and Dad Swinford, because they finally got rid of us from their apartment above the garage well. Mom Swinford was not so happy, since she did not see Dylan and Diddy as often as before. When I started kindergarten, Donna successfully convinced me after some hesitation to let her return to work during the day while the kids were at school. She assured me that this would not affect our family time or time spent with the kids or me. For the most part, she kept that promise. Around the time Dylan was about to start high school in our Vancouver area, Grandpa Taylor was forced to deal with the grief of losing Grandma Taylor. A short time later, he called my father and I to meet him at his home. "Tom," he said to my father, "I know you and Ruth love where you are and don't want to move. For this reason, I want you to consider deeding this house to Glenn as a one-generation pass. The house is in good condition and fully paid for." I expected my father to object to his own father neglecting him in this matter, but he seemed okay with it. After all, he and Mom although not rich, were financially quite secure. I was still surprised and asked, "Grandpa, don't you want to stay here among the memories of Grandma and you together?" "Son," Grandpa Taylor said with a sad smile, "that's why I need to move out of here. These memories are so sweet that they make me sad that she is no longer here to talk to me about them. No, I want you to have this house for your young family, and I'm going to take an old motorhome from a communal parking lot and go see some places here in the Northwest that I never got to see before I was too old for this." So Donna and I, along with our 2 children, became residents of my grandfather Taylor's home in Woodland, north of Vancouver. When the new deed was registered, Grandpa Taylor insisted that it be in my name only. I didn't realize it at the time, but now I'm glad he did it. It made the house somewhat divorce-proof. If he had not done this, it would have been very difficult for me to fight for and win custody in the litigation surrounding our divorce. About a year ago, Dees had been renting a room from us for about 8 months when I noticed a change in his behavior. He weakened in the weeks after he first came to us, and Donna and I easily engaged him in conversation after that. He showed remarkable patience with the almost constant stream of questions from the then 13-year-old Dylan. I noticed a change in Diz's behavior, but decided that he was probably trying to solve some technical problem with the UAVs we were experimenting with. "Yes," I said, "we." The company I worked for in Vancouver coordinated large-scale catering operations in support of several airlines operating out of Portland International Airport in Oregon. PDX was located directly across the Columbia River from Vancouver, Washington, only about 13 miles on Highway 14 and I-205. Each day, our caterers, cooks, packers, and transporters prepared, packaged, and delivered custom airline meals to PDX, customized for the flight deck on large aircraft to serve in flight meals. We pride ourselves on providing quality prepared meals at a very competitive price. The fixed base operations coordinator at PDX agreed with this assessment as he renewed our contract annually. Thanks to this, we were a very profitable enterprise. Some of the profits distributed came in the form of periodic bonuses rather than salaries. As a department manager, I received some bonuses that were surprising in their generosity. As I mentioned earlier, I realized early in our marriage that Donna and I had different ideas about financial management. To prevent my bonus money from becoming a noticeable stream of cash flowing out of my home, I took some protective measures. I found a consulting team of 2 brothers, one of whom was certified in finance and the other an attorney. They helped me build my investment portfolio, providing tax and legal advice that went along with their services. When Deese's cousins made their offer via email and then Skype, I eventually became convinced that investing in their venture could be very lucrative, and I was willing to take the risk. What I didn't want to do was share any financial rewards with Donna, as it was around this time that I found out about her secret life. My investment team helped me hide this investment venture from Donna and helped me manage my time until the terms of the divorce were finalized. Why did I hide this from my wife instead of incorporating it into our family finances, you ask? Well, because I finally convinced Diz to tell me what was bothering him. "Glenn," Dees said hesitantly, "did you know that I tested the camera support under the first UAV in tracking and maintaining position?" When I nodded, still not understanding his concern, he continued, "Well, the stabilizing feature of the software now allows me to follow a moving object. In addition," Dees continued, "the GPS feature and higher endurance motor on the UAV now allow me to keep it above a fixed position on the ground for up to 4 hours. The video recording feature on the tablet controller allows you to record video for even longer, but the device's latency is a factor in this." I knew that wildlife management professionals really valued these features so they could keep an eye on things like herds of bison, caribou, and elk. And the new, quieter rotary engines we installed did not make enough noise to frighten the observed subjects in the process while satisfying noise environmentalists. These then started going into technicalities that I didn't understand, turning away from me as he spoke. I sighed and touched his shoulder, causing him to look at my face again. "Diz, stay on topic. What's bothering you so much?" I asked. You know I want to help in any way I can." I was still convinced that this was some complex technical problem he was facing. Although I couldn't help much with the technical aspects of our project, I was willing to support my part in our partnership. Not only was I providing capital, I was offering Dees a place to live, a place to build and test equipment, and most importantly for focused engineers prone to mood swings support. He hesitated and thought for a second, looking at me. He then reached for the tablet controller. "I'll just show you." His eyes began to dart as he said this, and he followed the strange comment, falling back into some of his early Indian speech habits. "But please don't blame the messenger." Dees picked up the tablet controller after playing the saved video. At first, it was difficult for me to understand what I was seeing. The movement was blurry and shaky. "This is where the video stabilization kicks in," he explained, zooming in on the video on the tablet screen as the moving image began to flow smoothly on the screen. I watched the ground beneath the UAV move across the roughly 9-inch screen. I noticed a change from grass and trees to asphalt and concrete. He apparently piloted the UAV out of fields and forests into more built-up areas. "I think I could post a lesson through your window, but I didn't want to scare you and didn't want to endanger the UAV." He seemed to smile as he said this. I still didn't understand what he was talking about. And then I realized what I was seeing on the screen. I was looking at myself. It was a video of me at my desk, talking towards my speakerphone in my office. I heard nothing but the drone of the UAV and traffic noises and other sounds you would expect in a commercial area. "You took this from outside my office window," I exclaimed. Diz just nodded as I continued to watch. I was impressed by the quality of the video. Of course, I smiled as I realized that our company would need to pay more attention to the details of our building cleaning and maintenance contract. The window through which I was looking at myself in the video from the outside was visibly dirty and in desperate need of cleaning. I couldn't help but giggle. Suddenly, the image on the screen changed to a rainbow mixture of pastel and dark colors. The shapes that were there before with normal video are now only left as outlines. But the colors were strange. It felt like I was in the middle of a weather radar on the Weather Channel. "It's infrared," Dees said before I could ask. Now that I realized I was watching the video in infrared mode, I realized that different colors actually represent different heat signatures. The window, since it was in direct sunlight, obviously distorted what was viewed through it, as it had its own heat signature. "Diz, this is amazing," I said with a smile. "I know the wildlife service guys are going to have a blast tracking the herds." Dees didn't answer this. He handed back the tablet controller and activated what looked like another video file. He sighed and handed it to me to look at. This time, the video started in infrared mode. From the shapes I saw, I realized that the drone was hovering over a parked car with a driver and a passenger in it, based on the heat signatures. As I watched, human forms got out of the car and walked towards the trunk. Their actions were indistinguishable, but they could be removing something from the trunk of the car. They walked away from the car, and I noticed that the angle of the video had changed to keep them in view, but the position of the drone had not changed. I had to avoid the tree they ended up under after they got the blanket out of the trunk. Dees started to get nervous as he said that. I noticed that the Indian accent had returned to his voice. Diz sighed again as the screen switched from infrared to video mode. This way I could see that the video was shot in daylight, late morning, or early afternoon, depending on the light level. Another thing I was able to see was the clear sight of my wife Donna, naked and in the arms of Dean Winston. Winston was one of our classmates at school and was known to be a womanizer. He was also one of the 3 or 4 other guys Donna was dating when she and I were forced to get married because she was pregnant with Dylan. Not surprisingly, I was less than thrilled to learn the year before, following Dee's revelation, that Dean Winston had returned to Vancouver after finishing his studies at Boise State University and working for several years in Seattle. Moreover, he now worked for the same company that Donna worked for. How convenient is this? When Dean and Donna's on-screen characters were finally completely naked, and she was lying on her back on a blanket with him between her thighs getting ready for action. I turned away and cursed. I put my hands in my pockets so as not to hit something out of anger. Or anyone. Diz paused the video and clutched the tablet controller to his chest. "I'm so sorry, my friend," Diz said. "I was just trying to test the tracking and hovering features on easily recognizable people and objects. So I mainly used you and your wife so you could test how well the systems worked. I didn't know that when I started." Diz fell silent because I was no longer listening to him. After 3 minutes of silence in the room, broken only by the heavy breathing of my anger, I finally spoke. "Is this the only video you have?" I asked. Diz hesitated for a few seconds and said, "I have 3 more entries, but there were other cases." Silence fell again. After half a minute, I said, "Is it about the same every time?" I didn't really want to know, but it was just something to say at that moment. After all, my thoughts had already turned to those related to the dissolution of my marriage. "No," Diz replied. "Based on the other 3 videos and other observations, they take long lunch breaks together and go to a quiet area near Vancouver. They usually stay in his car and—" Here he simply touched the screen to start another video. The brightness and contrast of this video were very different, and I commented on that. "It's because of the rain," Diz said. I nodded. Yes, it rained a lot in the Vancouver-Portland area in the spring. I could understand why they preferred to stay in Dean Winston's car during their meetings. Heck, I remember hearing Winston showing off his new car with the huge panoramic sunroof. Some cars with this feature have a full glass roof, others with several panels. They are all designed to open the entire cabin to the sun and allow at least part of the cabin to be open to fresh air. Some people enjoy the wind in their hair, others just like to sit and watch the stars in the evening. Of course, when it rains, which often happens in the Vancouver-Portland area, the panoramic sunroof still provides visibility, but without having to endure rain in your face, or, in the case of the ladies, in your hair. Dean Winston's car was a Chrysler 300s with all the bells and whistles, including a 2-panel panoramic sunroof, which he loved to brag about. Yes, the ladies like to do it in the luxury of my car, enjoying the beauty of the sun and the stars above. I heard him say this at least twice at work parties I was forced to go to with Donna. I didn't hear my wife mention Dean or do anything at these meetings that would make me suspicious. It seems my wife and her long-term lover have become very good at hiding the signs of infidelity. As Diz held the tablet in front of me, showing the betrayal of my bitch wife, I saw the heat signatures show that they were doing something similar to taking off clothes in the front seat of the car. They kissed often while doing this. Finally, I saw the passenger move into the back seat, and they were having sex. I didn't see any signs that the driver was trying to put on a condom, so I assumed they were doing it without protection. Not only did my bitch wife cheat on me, she put my health and possibly life at risk by allowing that son of a bitch to have sex without protection. With his apparently carefree attitude towards sex, I wouldn't be surprised if he frequently contracted 1 or more forms of gonorrhea throughout his so-called adult life. "Dis," I finally said, "I'm going to need copies of these videos. And it looks like I'm about to have a serious conversation with my future ex-wife about her extramarital affairs, so to speak. I will also need these videos as evidence when I sue for custody of my children." Diz nodded and said, "Given her background, are you sure?" He suddenly fell silent, but I understood what he meant. Are the children even mine? This is something I would need to test from a biological perspective. But from the point of view of love, it didn't matter. My children were mine. I didn't care who conceived the child. I loved Dylan and Dee Dee, and they loved me. I wouldn't give them up without a fight, and even then I wouldn't rest until I got them back. However, Diz had a question. "Yeah, I guess I need to do DNA tests, huh?" "I'm so sorry, my friend," Diz said, looking apologetic. I nodded at him and placed a calming hand on his shoulder. The video was still playing, and I sighed. "Hey, Diz," I said, trying to contain my anger, although I hoped it didn't show in my voice. "Do you have any actual video, I don't mean of these cases?" Diz grinned proudly, paused the current video and played another. This video again featured a sex scene, again Donna having sex with her lover in the back seat. This time it was in full normal video mode, and their heads and faces could be seen from behind and just above the rear edge of Winston's car. It was only a few seconds before the view switched back to mode directly above the car. I looked at Diz with a question in my eyes. I lowered the drone and zoomed in for a few seconds to get a clear shot. Diz responded. I could only keep the drone there for a few seconds, barely long enough to get a clear shot before moving out of their sight again. I didn't want to alert them to the presence of the drone and camera. You see, you know that Donna knows about our efforts in this program, and she saw some of the demonstrations we did in the backyard. She would instantly recognize a drone if she saw it, and would realize that it might be capturing an image. I had already stopped logically comprehending the situation I found myself in today when Diz revealed his secret. I am going through emotional levels now. I was hurt on a personal level, but I was also worried about my children. Mostly, however, I was angry and bitterly resentful of the two I saw in the video. My loving wife not only cheated on me and put me in danger by allowing Winston to have sex with her without protection. It was the complete contempt and level of disrespect with which she conducted her affair that really drove me crazy. Oh yeah, divorce is one thing. Revenge is different. I had already made arrangements with my lawyer, Myrna Hawk, and had the paperwork ready by the time Diz and I finally did. Vengeance Day sounds like the title of an interesting movie, doesn't it? I asked Diz about the regularity of the cheating couple's midday meetings, and he confirmed that it always happened during the long lunch break on Fridays, but sometimes on Tuesdays, the busiest day of the week. I gave the DVD-R copies of the videos that Diz had already given me to Myrna Hawk, and asked her the questions necessary to determine the best way to serve my wife with the documents in a manner that would be as painful and humiliating as possible. She said she can send documents to anywhere within 20 miles of Woodland, and even the northern outskirts of Vancouver within an hour, and actually be in the recipient's hands within 2 hours. I printed one shot of a happy couple having sex on a blanket under the trees. I will include this frame in the divorce package. The DVD-R of these videos will only remain in Myrna Hawk's office as a precaution. Meanwhile, I secretly took swabs and hair samples from both of my children. The first while they were sleeping, the second from their hairbrush and comb on the top of their mirrored dressing tables. The results came back in just a couple of weeks. I entered Myrna Hawk's office address as the return address. So I was in Myrna's small conference room when I learned that Dylan was indeed my son. Ugh, I think Father and Mr. Swinford were right in forcing me to marry Donna at the time. My hand shook slightly as I checked the second set of results. Dina wasn't mine. Well, biologically, she will always be mine if I can control it. I loved my baby girl too much to lose her to the shenanigans my soon-to-be ex-wife would no doubt undertake. The second set of results hardened my heart even more. Obviously, this thing with Winston wasn't the first time she'd spread her legs for another man while married to me. That pussy that was supposed to be mine exclusively seemed to be a kind of bus stop for her various lovers where they could come and go as soon as she could figure out a schedule without me finding out about it. The day of revenge had to be chosen carefully, depending on the weather forecast for the chosen Friday. In fact, it took Diz and I another 4 weeks of patiently waiting and adding to our video library during that time before the right day appeared on the horizon. It was now May, and the weather forecast for the coming Friday was not only mostly sunny, but also with an expected humidity level of an incredibly low 15%. Sure, if the couple doesn't get out of the car, they'll probably do it in the back seat with the panoramic sunroof open. Everything depended on the weather. But Diz and I were ready to act anyway. "Oh, Glenn, are you sure about this? I mean, it's just so disgusting," Diz complained. We were busy pouring the contents of the bucket in front of us into one of several special weather balloons I found at the military store. We developed the bombing capability of the drone, which was now called the Enola Gay. Diz fitted it with a fuse using compressed carbon dioxide, and we filled one of the weather balloons with water. Dees carefully inserted the fuse inside the filled balloon before I sealed it, leaving the fuse cable outside. We wrapped fabric tape around the seal several times and made a loop from the same tape. This loop will be held by a remotely activated pizza delivery guy, so to speak, on the underside of the Enola Gay drone. One touch of the tablet controller screen will release the weight on command. When the ball falls far enough to pull the fuse cable, it will go off and the ball will explode in a sudden watery explosion. I insisted on 3 test runs with water balloons in the backyard. We ran the last 2 rehearsals in conjunction with moving alternating strobes, the one we now called Et after the famous movie that featured a lot of flashing lights on the spaceship that delivered and picked up the movie's protagonist. "You can be sure that I am sure of that," I said in response to Deese's question. "I want them to be in the shit literally." With these words, I continued to fill the ball with a disgusting mixture of piss and shit. The idea came to me when I was driving around, feeling sorry for myself, and stopped at a small parking lot run by the Washington State Parks and Recreation Commission. The primitive site, while keeping it green and untouched, as the conservationists here like it, apparently actually had an equally primitive toilet instead of the chemical one found at most more modern sites. Then I smiled evilly as an idea came into my head on how exactly I could take revenge. Now I was careful to wear surgical gloves when filling the balloon, just like Diz. We had a bucket of bleach and water mixed with disinfectant next to us. Once we finished filling the balloon, we wanted to seal it tightly and hang it on a hook in the garage while we dipped our hands in the cleaning solution. It would be bad if Diz and I, after taking revenge on the cheaters, contracted hepatitis or something equally terrible in the process. We also needed to make sure we didn't overfill the balloon. Previous water balloons were significantly larger so that we could provide a safety margin in terms of payload weight and volume for the actual operation. Now all I had to do was wait about an hour for Dean Winston and my wife Donna to leave work for their weekly Friday afternoon sex session. I went to my tablet controller and started the ET engine 10 minutes before the traders usually left the building. After about 30 seconds of warming up, I picked up the ET from its cover in a grove of trees across the parking lot from the building where my wife worked. I practiced with the camera attached under the ET using a gimbal and got good at changing the orientation of the camera as the platform moved. I left the ET in hover mode, practicing controlling camera movement and zoom to make sure the mount didn't jam at the wrong moment. I wanted to make sure I captured all the painfully humiliating action. I couldn't help but be surprised that I was over 13 miles from where Et was monitoring my wife's place of work. Alibi, still would. Sure enough, Donna and Dean walked out the door leading into the parking lot, together and on time. They didn't even seem to care what their coworkers thought, which apparently partly explains the poor fool looks I've been getting from some of my wife's coworkers at the last couple of work events. "Okay, Diz, we know where they are going. Let's load up Enola Gay," I told my friend. With these words, we carefully removed the filled balloon from the hook in the garage. It was scary when I almost dropped it. But we stopped and lowered the pulse below about 600 and moved the ball to the place where Enola Gay stood. I let Dees handle the matter. He was an expert in attaching the fuse and suspension mechanism to carry the load. I went back to the ET monitoring and moved it to the correct position. The view from above of Dean's moving Chrysler quickly became boring, but the excitement of what we were doing kept us on our toes and focused. The walk to Donna and Dean's favorite parking spot usually took about 10 minutes, and today was no different. Diz laughed quietly and said, "Oh yeah, quietly." When I asked what he meant, he chuckled and said, "Look at the hatch." As I turned and zoomed the camera a little to get a good view, I saw that Winston had opened the panoramic sunroof of his luxury car so they could feel the spring breeze as they drove. I prayed to myself that they would leave it open. It had rained the night before, so the ground was very wet. Today, however, the weather was gorgeous, around 60 degrees and mostly sunny, with the humidity temporarily leaving the area. The conditions could not have been better for our purposes. Of course, as soon as the car stopped, the couple got out and saw that the ground was too wet to have sex on the ground under the trees. They embraced in a passionate kiss and began to undress each other. We watched from a corner among the trees nearby as they took off each other's clothes without shame, right in the open air. They then leaned into the car to place items in the front passenger seat footrest, kissing and caressing each other between removing each item of clothing. Damn it! I thought she was still an attractive woman, even if she was flawed. I noticed in passing that Dean Winston's equipment was in the Goldilocks category, not too big, not too small, just noticed, without dwelling on it. I watched, gritting my teeth, as my wife of almost 15 years opened the back passenger door of the car and climbed inside, preparing for sex. I kept the Ed in hover mode to the side, out of their line of sight, and told Dees to begin his maneuver. From this point on, I slowly and carefully moved the Et to a position below the line of sight and behind the curve of the trunk of the car in which the cheaters were now having sex. I almost wondered when I heard Diz's warning. "Okay," he almost shouted. Having come to his senses, he said, "Final approach. Strobe and signal in 3, 2, 1. Then, in a calm voice, a little louder than a whisper, he said, "Now." I raised the Et to the level of the rear window. I caught a glimpse of the ecstatic expressions on the faces of a couple having sex in the back seat as I activated first the strobe lights and then the police alarm. Today, I covered the strobes with dark blue film. As the bright flashing lights came on, I chuckled briefly, thinking about what must have been going through the couple's minds. The lights looked like those on the roof of a police car. Woo-woo. This sound has been almost universally recognized in the United States as a police car horn. As planned, the couple stopped moving and stood still for a few seconds. Their horrified expressions were captured for posterity by a video stream from Et. I smiled at their discomfort and congratulated myself for surprising them so much that I almost missed Diz's words. Bombs away. I have to admit, I wasn't expecting anything as disgustingly unpleasant as what the Et video showed. The movement inside the car behind the couple in my viewfinder looked like something falling through the hatch, but it only lasted a moment before the rear window, except for the area covered by the couple's heads and shoulders, was covered in a disgusting brown film. It took a few seconds for the couple to realize that they were now covered in a brown haze of piss and soft shit, like the entire interior of Dean Winston's precious luxury Chrysler 300s. They were looking out the back window as Deese's device exploded, leaving their faces minimally covered with only residual drips from the ceiling of the car. This was planned when Diz and I were developing the attack. I had to make sure they were facing away from the fuse so they didn't get shit blown in their eyes. We didn't want to blind them, or in their nose or mouth. We also didn't want them to swallow anything. After all, it's one thing to tell someone to eat crap and die. It's another thing entirely to realize that if they actually eat even a little crap, they could very well get so sick that they die. I wanted to get back at them rather than worry about being accused of murder. "Mission accomplished," Dees said in a suddenly authoritative voice. Then, more gently, he added, "I think it's time to wind down, my friend." With that, we directed Enola Gay and get away from the scene, keeping them at low levels. We got them home within 20 minutes and celebrated with our arms around each other and a Budweiser Black Crown. Diz left on my instructions, leaving me at home to await Donna's ignominious return. I reactivated the IT to watch the main highway leading into our area and quickly returned it to the garage when I saw the Chrysler turn off the highway. I have already warned Myrna Hawk to have a courier in the area and be ready to act within 10 minutes. She gave me his cell number, and I put it in my phone to alert him when I saw Donna's car pull up to our house. My car was parked a few houses down from ours, so Donna wouldn't know I was home. I must admit that Winston's car was beautiful, at least from the outside. When he put it in park, I could still see brown streaks on the inside of the windshield. I think he used his tank top or something to wipe it down enough to drive. When the passenger door opened, I saw a pathetic figure. Donna's face was cleared of the nasty substance that had clearly permeated the entire interior of Dean's car, including all the clothes they had piled into the front passenger footrest while they were doing business in the back seat. I knew this because I watched the Enola Gay video while Diz and I were enjoying our post-flight beers. Diz's accuracy was phenomenal. The ball of shit entered the car directly through the open panoramic sunroof, and the detonator blew its disgusting contents just a few inches above the center console between the front seats. The Enola Gay's camera captured a brown explosive effect that spread throughout the entire car almost instantly, even down to the footmat where their clothes were folded. A relatively small number escaped from the hatch, thanks to the focus direction of the fuse set by Diz. The guy was really talented at this. I watched as another dark car pulled up to the curb and its driver got out and walked towards my porch. He looked like a man in his late 20s or early 30s, and he was carrying a large manila envelope. He walked quickly across the yard and caught up with Donna before she reached the porch. I opened the window in the living room slightly so that sound could travel in both directions outside and inside. He got close enough to Donna and began his formal speech. Donna, I couldn't help but laugh. He started again, trying to speak and breathe through his mouth at the same time. Donna Taylor, he asked, sounding like he was trying to breathe through his mouth and talk at the same time. Humans, this smell must be really terrible. Yes, but I can't. Talk now. She replied, trying to get rid of him. Bless his heart, he pressed on and simply said, Here. I looked out the window and saw Donna take the envelope he handed to her. I think it was a reflex reaction. He then quickly walked to his car and said as he walked back, Donna Taylor, you have received a summons. He snapped a photo of her on his phone, still stepping back to capture the event, along with the date and time of service of the summons. Winston wanted to leave immediately. Apparently, he wanted to distance himself from his old mistress, take a shower, find a cleaner with the courage to clean his car, or an arsonist who would simply set it on fire and bring it out of its misery and move on with life, looking forward to the weekend. It took him a few minutes to get out of my parking lot because the delivery driver's car was partially blocking him. The courier took out another envelope and walked up to the driver's window of Dean Winston's car. I didn't hear it, but it looked like the delivery guy had confirmed Dean's identity and simply tossed the envelope out the window, stepped back to take a photo, and drove off. Apparently, the smell was just as bad around the car as it was around Donna. I moved away from the window so Donna wouldn't see me watching the events unfold in my front yard. I heard her son. I don't know if it was a son of anger, sadness, self-pity, or a mixture of all three. I heard a few more after that. She tried to use her key and found that it no longer worked. I took the opportunity this morning to change the locks and replace the garage door remote before the retaliation operation began. She still didn't know if I was home, but she still rang the bell and listened. She knocked on the door several times and kicked it once. Then I heard a sound like she came down onto the porch and sat down by the door. Some time has passed. Then I felt my cell phone vibrate in my pocket. I turned off the ringer so that she would not detect my presence in the house. I walked into the kitchen before answering the phone. What? Usually, when I saw her number on the screen, I would respond with, "Hello, darling," or some other endearing word, not this time. "Glenn, darling, something terrible happened and She broke into a burst of loud, pitiful crying. I stayed in touch until she calmed down after a minute. "Oh, Glenn, I can't get into the house. My key doesn't work. And I need to shower and cleanse so bad. Ugh," I almost laughed, imagining her sitting on the porch, crying, feeling her shit-soaked clothes chafing her skin. Finally, I spoke. "Donna, did you receive the package I sent you?" Yes, she replied. "What is this?" "The rude man who gave it to me said that I had received a summons." "What did he mean?" I couldn't believe she didn't figure it out. "Well, I guess you should open it up and see exactly what he meant," I said. I couldn't resist using a harsh tone in my response. I heard her tearing the envelope, probably holding the phone to her neck and chin. "Glenn, why are you suddenly so angry?" Oh no, no. I had Myrna Hawk make sure that the first item in the divorce packet was a photograph of Donna and Dean having sex on a blanket on the ground. From the angle at which the photo was taken, it appeared that the tall man with the camera had taken it from about 30 feet away using a zoom lens. The secret of drone video will remain between a few of us. Contrary to what most people expected, the divorce went smoothly for me. A timed and dated snapshot of the cheaters may have helped, I don't know. Since Washington state does not require fault in divorce and does not require a period of separation before divorce, the process was fairly quick. I received the house because it was in my name, but had to provide a significant amount of monetary assets to Donna. This included a minimum of 2 years of child support since she was still working. Since the house was mine, the court decided that it is in the best interests of the children that a pattern of interaction is maintained, changing only as much as is necessary due to changes in the parents' relationship or as required to protect the child from physical, mental, or emotional harm. Simply put, this meant that the children should remain in the house with me so as not to change their usual interaction pattern. To Donna's credit, she did not try to portray me as physically, mentally, or emotionally abusive. If she did, I would provide Myrna Hawk with a list of witnesses who would testify that I was not abusive. I was unable to completely free Dylan and Dee Dee from Donna's influence because the court ordered shared decision-making, which meant Donna could still be involved in the children's lives. Well, I suppose, given the way the courts tend to undermine fathers' rights, and given that I haven't been completely squeezed, I could give Donna a little leeway without much protest. Of course, I wished I didn't have to deal with my ex-wife at all, but I still had kids to take care of. Until now, I have protected them from the facts of betrayal, which destroyed our marriage. I plan to keep them in the dark for as long as possible. Donna rented an apartment just a few miles away. Guess who had to pay for it? She was closer to Vancouver and her place of work. What particularly irritated me was the requirement to pay for her cable TV connection. I didn't care if Donna was dating or trying to form some other relationship. This issue was never raised during the regular visitation of children, and I did not ask. In general, I suffered financially for about 6 months, until payments began to come in from the business that Dees and I were doing with his cousins in India. Surprisingly, we didn't need to produce anything. We just had to be the masterminds and intermediaries in the deals that led to the production, special configuration, and transportation of Dees structures. We had to hire another attorney to handle the export issues because our products were still not legal for commercial use in the U.S. and there were some trade restrictions on technology exports. But oh God, once the Federal Aviation Administration gives us the green light here in the United States, the sky literally is the limit. I finally got a little financial boost when the court ruled in my favor on my intentional infliction of emotional distress claim against Dean Winston. It turned out that the guy had a lot of debt, and the final payment to me after attorney fees and other expenses was only $43,000. Ah, well. In the meantime, I was still making good money at my day job. Life started to get better a few months after the divorce, I think. I started to miss my intimate life a little. I laughed when I learned that Dean Winston's insurance agent refused to declare the car a total loss, insisting on a thorough cleaning and return to service. I knew, as did Dean, that he would never get rid of the smell of shit in his upholstery. Dean continued to insist that police were on the scene when the hoodlums damaged his car. He argued that the police car's incident camera should have captured some evidence to support his story. Calls to the State Patrol and the Clark and Cowlitz County Sheriff's Departments seeking the name of an officer or deputy who might be there yielded no results. Diz and I were tight-lipped about the shit-bombing incident. We didn't really say or do anything to raise suspicion until Donna witnessed our little show tonight at Dee Dee's party and finally connected the dots. I put Dee Dee to bed after we took her friend home. Dylan went to his room and probably surfed the internet before finally going to bed. "Did you enjoy your 12th birthday, baby?" I asked Dee Dee as she covered herself with the blanket. Soon it will probably be a few months before I will no longer be welcomed into her room at bedtime. She's clearly growing up before my eyes. "Papa," she said softly with feigned irritation. "I am not your baby." Then she giggled. I couldn't help myself. I started to cry quietly. She saw my tears and said, "Dad, I didn't mean to. I just meant." "Honey," I said as I gathered her into my arms for a hug, blanket and all. "You will always be my baby." She hugged me back and said, "I know, Dad. I know." I kissed her forehead, and as she lay back down, I looked into her eyes and said, "You're just so special, Dee." She smiled at me and closed her eyes. The DNA results that showed I was not the father of this little girl will never see the light of day if I can help it. I couldn't know for sure, but given Donna's insistence on naming her, the odds were pretty high that Dean Winston had impregnated Donna during one of his visits from school in Boys all those years ago. This could be Donna's way of secretly laughing at me. I don't think she told Winston even though she knew he was Dee Dee's biological father. Otherwise, she would have to answer questions about her other lovers, and this would probably come up when he tried to fight my lawsuit against him. It didn't matter now. I had my kids with me, and my cheating bitch ex-wife was out of the house. I went downstairs and looked at my watch, noting that it was only 9:10. I usually don't answer calls after 9 in the evening, letting the answering machine take them. I always thought it was rude to call my house after 9 p.m. unless it was an emergency. For some reason, however, this evening when the phone rang at 9:15, I decided to answer. I was surprised, but somehow relieved to hear a voice on the other end. Sandy Malloy's voice spoke into my phone with obvious amusement. "Okay, Glenn, want to tell me what that vicious punch from your ex was about?" Remember when I said earlier that this is not one of those stories where the cheated guy has ready female company when he finally divorces his cheating wife? Well, maybe I was wrong. End. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think click to the next one.